What if the fate of a powerful, feared, and conflict-ridden nation was written from the dawn of time? In today's headlines, Iran takes center stage. International tensions, strategic alliances, nuclear ambitions, and threats that echo worldwide. Yet, what few know is that its story doesn't begin in newsrooms but in the oldest pages of the Bible. From Genesis to the apocalyptic prophecies, Iran, known in antiquity as Persia, not only has a traced origin but also a prophetic role that culminates in one of the most chilling events, the War of Gog and Magog. But before becoming an adversary in the last days, Persia was a divine instrument, chosen to free God's people and restore their temple. Join me on this fascinating journey, where we will unveil Iran's purpose in the divine plan, from its birth to its final destiny. It all begins after the flood, in a world renewed by God's will. In Genesis 10, the first record of nations descending from Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, unfolds. This chapter, known as the Table of Nations, describes how humanity spread and formed distinct peoples. Among them, two names stand out as the foundations of ancient Persia, Madai and Elam. Madai, a descendant of Japheth, gave rise to the Medes, a resilient people who settled in the mountainous northern regions of what is now Iran. They were strong clans, forged by life in the highlands, with a tribal organization that made them formidable. On the other hand, Elam, a son of Shem, fathered the Elamites, who thrived in the fertile southwestern plains near the Persian Gulf. These two branches, Medes and Elamites, would become the pillars of the future Persian Empire. The first significant mention of Elam appears in Genesis 14, in a conflict that marks biblical history, the first recorded international war. Four eastern kings, led by Kedar-Laomer, king of Elam, unite to conquer Canaan. They ravage cities, enslave peoples, and capture Lot, Abraham's nephew. But Abraham, with just 318 men, defies the impossible. In a nighttime attack, he defeats the eastern armies, frees Lot, and humiliates the invaders. This victory not only highlights Abraham's faith but sends a clear message. No power, however great, can prevail against those protected by God. However, the Elamites did not vanish. Over time, they grew, strengthened, and alongside the Medes, began to forge a new power in the shadows. As centuries passed, the Medes and Elamites consolidated in eastern Mesopotamia. The Medes dominated the northern mountains, while the Elamites prospered in the lowlands. Though they were pagan peoples, they were not outside the reach of the divine plan. The prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah spoke words that would shape their destiny. Isaiah revealed that God would use Elam and Media as instruments to punish Babylon, the empire that had destroyed Jerusalem and its temple. But the prophecy didn't end there. God also announced that a Persian king, yet unborn, would be his anointed to free Israel from exile and rebuild the temple. This king, named by Isaiah over a century in advance, was Cyrus. In the 7th century BC, the Medes, under Dios's leadership, united their tribes and established Ecbatana as their capital. His grandson, Cyaxares, transformed their army into an unstoppable force, capable of destroying Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, a historic enemy of Israel. The prophecies began to unfold. But it was Cyrus, the great Persian king, who brought Persia to its zenith. After unifying Medes and Persians, Cyrus conquered Babylon in a historic night. According to the book of Daniel, while the Babylonian king Belshazzar profaned the sacred vessels from Jerusalem's temple during a banquet, an invisible hand wrote on the wall, Min, Tekel, Upharsin. Daniel interpreted the message. Babylon's kingdom had been weighed and found wanting. It would be given to the Medes and Persians. That same night, Cyrus entered the city, Belshazzar was killed, and Babylon fell. Cyrus not only conquered but fulfilled Isaiah's prophecy by freeing the exiled Jews. He decreed their return to Jerusalem, funded the temple's reconstruction, and sent leaders like Zerubbabel and Joshua to restore worship. Unlike other empires, Persia did not destroy Israel but restored it, becoming an instrument of divine redemption. Yet, prophetic visions also warned of a darker future for Persia. Daniel, a young Hebrew captive in Babylon, received revelations that transcended his time. In one vision, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of a statue of metals. The golden head represented Babylon, but the silver chest and arms symbolized the Medes and Persians, a dual empire that would succeed Babylon. In another vision, Daniel saw a bear raised on one side, with 3 ribs in its mouth, representing Persia's conquests of Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. Later, by the Ulai River, Daniel beheld a ram with 2 horns, one higher than the other, symbolizing Persia's supremacy over the Medes. But this ram was struck down by a swift he-goat, representing Greece under Alexander the Great, prophesying Persia's fall. At its height, Persia ruled from India to Ethiopia, with its capital in Susa, in the heart of Elam. It was there that one of the Bible's most extraordinary miracles occurred, the story of Esther. A young Jewish orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, was chosen as queen by King Ahasuerus. When Haman, an Amalekite official, plotted the genocide of the Jews, Esther risked her life to intercede before the king. In a providential turn, Haman was executed, the Jews were granted the right to defend themselves, and the day meant for their destruction became a victory. Persia, once again, was a refuge for God's people. Centuries later, Persia reappeared in Matthew's Gospel. The Magi from the east, likely from the Persian region, followed a star to Bethlehem to worship the Messiah. With gold, frankincense, and myrrh, they acknowledged his kingship, divinity, and sacrifice. These wise men, heirs to Daniel's prophetic tradition, were the first Gentiles to honor Jesus, showing that Persia remained tied to the divine plan. But Persia's biblical story doesn't end at Christ's cradle. In Ezekiel 38, the war of Gog and Magog is prophesied, a coalition of nations that, in the last days, will attack Israel. Persia is explicitly named alongside Cush, possibly Sudan, Put, perhaps Libya, Gomer, and Togarmah, regions of Turkey and the Caucasus. Led by Gog, from the land of Magog, these nations will rise like a storm, but their attack will provoke divine intervention. Earthquakes, fire, and confusion will destroy the coalition, and God will be glorified. Yet, the Bible doesn't close the door on Persia. Jeremiah 49 prophesies judgment on Elam but also restoration in the latter days. Though Persia joins the final rebellion, God promises to redeem its captives. This duality mirrors humanity's arc: fallen, judged, but with the possibility of redemption. In Zechariah 14, a future is envisioned where surviving nations, even those that opposed Israel, will go up to Jerusalem to worship the King. From Genesis to Revelation, Persia has been a key player in the biblical narrative. It rose from the flood's waters, challenged Abraham, punished Babylon, freed Israel, crowned Esther, and recognized the Messiah. But in the last days, it will align against Israel, facing divine judgment. Even so, its story doesn't end in defeat. The promise of restoration suggests that, like humanity, Persia can find redemption. Today, as we see Iran in the headlines, a question arises: are we witnessing the fulfillment of these prophecies? The tensions, alliances, and conflicts today echo Ezekiel's visions. Where do we stand in this prophetic timeline? Share your thoughts, and if you want to explore more connections between current events and biblical prophecies, engage with this content. Iran's story, written millennia ago, continues to unfold before our eyes, reminding us that nothing escapes God's sovereign plan.